It all began in the humid heart of Ibadan, where love could be found in small gestures like buying boli and groundnuts on a rainy day or holding an umbrella for someone not because you had to, but because you cared. I was a secondary school teacher then, humble, hopeful, and still glowing from the honeymoon phase of my marriage to Adiwale. Adiwale was tall, confident, and strikingly handsome. The kind of man whose presence sucked the air out of a room. A banker with dreams of becoming a regional manager before 40. I had met him during a church conference in Abeokuta, and by the next Easter, I had a ring on my finger. People envied us, called us the perfect couple. They didn't know that perfection sometimes has a cruel expiry date. The first year of our marriage was sweet. We laughed about our banned jollof rice, prayed together, and planned for children. But by the second year, everything changed. I gained weight. It wasn't overnight, of course. It crept up gradually after I lost our first baby in a traumatic miscarriage. The doctors had advised rest and hormonal treatments, and with them came extra pounds. I felt it in the way my dresses clung tighter, in how my hips refused to slide into jeans, and worst of all, in Adiwale's eyes. He stopped touching me. Stopped calling me by pet names. Started coming home later. I tried. I dieted, exercised, and even fasted under the guise of spiritual warfare. But it was never enough. One night, after a tense dinner where he barely spoke to me, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You used to be beautiful, Ronk. Now I don't even recognize you." It felt like acid being poured into my soul. Then came the whispers of a certain Kechi in his office. Slim, educated, bubbly. The kind of woman who wore waist trainers like armor. One day, I confronted him. And without blinking, he said, "Ronk, I want a divorce." Just like that. There was no scandal. No shouting. No neighbors peeking through louver windows. Just a cold signature, then my return to my parents' bungalow with a few boxes of clothes and broken dreams. I cried for months. My father kept saying, "Be strong, my daughter. Let no man define your worth." But I didn't feel strong. I felt discarded. Unlovable. Like a used towel thrown behind the bathroom door. Years passed. I worked, prayed, healed slowly. I stopped obsessing over my body. I started dressing up for me. I went back to school and got my master's degree in educational leadership. I even started a nonprofit that mentored teenage girls on self-esteem and career building. Still, I didn't date. I didn't trust myself to love again. What if I wasn't enough for any man? Then, one day at an education summit in Abuja, I was invited to speak on a panel. That's where I met Honorable Tand Ekinwell, the newly appointed Minister of Women Affairs. He was thoughtful, deeply intelligent, and surprisingly soft-spoken. I didn't know then that he would change the course of my life. We met again at a literacy campaign, and again at a conference in Accra. Our conversations stretched from politics to faith to our childhoods. When he asked for my number, I hesitated. But something in me whispered, "Ronk, don't let your past block your future." So I gave it. Months later, he asked if I would join his advisory team. I accepted. I wasn't sure where things were heading emotionally, but I knew this, for the first time in years, I felt seen, not for how I looked, but for the depth I carried. Then came the day of the gala. It was a high-profile state dinner hosted by the governor of Oyo State. Politicians, business tycoons, and media giants would all be there. Tand insisted I come as his guest. "You've worked hard. You deserve to be recognized," he said, holding my hand. I almost declined. But I remembered how far I'd come. I remembered the girl who cried herself to sleep over a man who measured love in dress sizes. So I said yes. The night of the gala, I wore a navy blue gown that hugged my calves just enough to command respect without begging for it. My hair was packed into an elegant bun, and a hint of gold shimmered on my cheeks. As I stood beside Tand, he whispered, "You look powerful tonight." As we entered the venue, camera flashes exploded like fireworks. People turned, noticing Tand and his guest. And then, in a moment that felt scripted by fate, I saw him, Adiwale. He stood near the drink section, older now, with grey streaks in his beard and a receding hairline that made him look more tired than mature. He froze when he saw me. His eyes swept over me, confused, then startled, then something close to regret. I didn't flinch. I didn't rush to hide or gloat. I simply walked past him, my hand resting lightly on the arm of the man who now honored me not just in public but in purpose. As Tand greeted the governor, Adiwale approached cautiously. "Ronk," he said, as if tasting the name. I turned slowly. "Yes, Adiwale. It's been a long time." He looked me up and down, searching for a crack in my confidence. "You look different." I smiled, soft but unshaken. "No, Adiwale. I've always looked like this. You just never saw me." He opened his mouth to speak again, but the governor called for attention as Tand was about to make his speech. I turned to walk away, and for the first time in a long while, I felt whole. I hadn't come to make him feel small. I had come to remind myself that I was never small to begin with. That night didn't end with a fairy tale kiss or romantic fireworks. It ended quietly, with a gentle conversation between Tand and me in the back seat of his official car as we left the gala. "I saw you speak to someone," he said, eyes still forward. "Someone from your past?" I hesitated, then nodded. "My ex-husband. The one who left when I gained weight." Tand didn't react with judgment or curiosity. He simply said, "He must be regretting that now." I smiled faintly. "Maybe. But that's not why I came tonight." He turned slightly, watching me. "Then why did you?" "Because I needed to walk into that room on my own terms. Not to prove a point, but to remind myself that healing is real. That who I am today is enough." He reached over and took my hand. "Ronk, I hope you know, I see you. Not just your work or your strength, but you." I didn't reply immediately. I let the warmth of his words soak through the layers of pain I thought were long gone. Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet acceptance of love when it finally comes from the right place. But despite all the progress, I couldn't sleep that night. Memories flooded in: how Adiwale once laughed at my weight during an argument, how he refused to accompany me to the hospital after my miscarriage, how he started hiding his phone like a child caught cheating. I thought I had buried it all. But trauma doesn't disappear. It lies dormant until something, like a chance meeting, brings it back like the sharp sting of salt in an old wound. The following week, I got a message from an unknown number. "Can we talk, please? I owe you more than an apology. Adiwale." I stared at the text for minutes. My fingers trembled, not with anger, but with caution. I'd moved on. But was I ready to listen? I replied, 1 hour. Saturday. Public place. He chose a quiet cafe near Bodija, away from his usual circle. When I arrived, he stood up. Time had worn on him. He looked successful still, gold wristwatch, crisp shirt, but something about him sagged. Maybe guilt. Maybe something deeper. "I know I don't deserve even 5 minutes," he began, "but I need to say this: I was wrong. I didn't leave because you changed. I left because I was too small to love someone evolving beyond my shallow expectations." I was stunned by the honesty. He wasn't trying to rekindle anything. Just confess. "I thought I needed someone perfect on the outside," he continued, "but I didn't realize I was the broken one. You were grieving. You needed support. And I failed you. I nodded silently. He looked up, eyes red. I'm sorry, wrong. I exhaled. Not because it fixed anything, but because hearing it, after years of silence, felt like closing a book I didn't know was still open. I walked out of the cafe with a strange lightness. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. The kind that comes when someone finally acknowledges the pain they caused you, and you realize you no longer need their validation. The sun was setting over Ibadan, casting a golden hue over the rusted rooftops and busy streets. As I stepped into my car, I looked into the rearview mirror, not to check my makeup, but to really see myself. I saw a woman who had been through storms and still stood tall. A woman who had once begged for love in whispers but now spoke boldly in rooms of power. I didn't just survive Adiwale, I outgrew him. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a National Women's Empowerment Summit in Lagos. I stood before hundreds of women, students, widows, single mothers, and professionals, each carrying invisible scars. My story, I said, isn't just about heartbreak or weight gain. It's about rediscovery. I thought I had lost everything when my marriage ended. But it turns out, I had only lost a man who couldn't see my worth. What I gained instead was priceless, self-respect, purpose, and peace. The crowd applauded, some women crying softly. I ended with, to every woman listening, your value isn't tied to your waistline, your relationship status, or your past mistakes. You are enough. And the people who are meant to walk with you will never ask you to shrink to fit their image. As I stepped off the stage, Tand met me with proud eyes. You didn't just walk in with the minister, he said with a smile. You are a minister to hearts. I laughed, blushing. And at that moment, something inside me shifted again. Not every story ends with revenge or with making someone wish they never left you. Some stories end with you walking into the future, unapologetically, beautifully whole. Adiwale never texted again. He didn't need to. His chapter in my life was closed, the ink dry. The true reward wasn't his regret. It was my growth. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is simply move on. This story isn't just a tale of love lost and success gained. It's a mirror for anyone who's ever been judged by how they look or been left for changing. Wrong's journey reminds us that worth is not determined by how others see us, but by how we see ourselves when the room is quiet and no one is watching. So the next time someone tries to dim your light, remember, growth is not a betrayal. It's a revolution. And when you finally walk back into the room, may it be with your head high, not to prove anything, but because you now know you never had to.